Good morning and welcome back to this playlist. What are we going to tackle today? Today we are going to talk about light intensity. And what is light intensity? Well, light intensity is the amount of light that is emitted from a light source. It is the amount of light generated by a lamp. And why do we talk about light intensity? We choose to discuss light intensity since it is one of the most frequently brought up topics in the relevant literature. Despite what is commonly believed, the main issue regarding light intensity is not that lamps produce too little light. In fact, as early as 2009, a researcher highlighted the fact that surgical lamps yield an excessive amount of illumination. Therefore, I find it suitable to initiate this discussion by referencing her testimony. In reality, the researcher demonstrated that the excessive amount of light produced by the surgical lamps caused glare, thereby creating a hazardous environment within the operating room. Expanding further on this quote, the primary focus for today will center around understanding the lighting standards that pertain to the level of brightness emitted by the light source within an operating room. Our exploration will delve deeper into the potential consequences that can arise from an excessively high intensity of light. Ultimately, our main objective is to determine or come close to determining the optimal value of light intensity that surgical lamps should provide. Before diving further into the topic of light intensity, I want to address an important point. We need to distinguish and understand the disparity between the quality of light and the intensity of light. These concepts often become tangled and create some confusion. One prevalent misconception is the notion that surgical lamps should continuously increase their light intensity, striving to become brighter and brighter. However, this belief is completely erroneous. We must recognize that more intensity does not equate to better quality. Surgical lamps should generate high-quality light to optimize visibility, but produce less light in terms of intensity. What separates a quality light from an intense one? This differentiation between the two types of light can be observed through their qualifications. A quality light is characterized by its ability to suppress shadows, provide accurate color reproduction, and deliver a deep level of illumination. These three aspects are crucial factors in assessing the overall quality of a light source. On the other hand, the intensity of a light is determined solely by a numerical value, typically measured in lux. This value indicates the brightness or quantity of light in a given area. The intensity of a light is not dependent on the aforementioned specifics of a quality light. Having a clear understanding of this distinction is vital when considering lighting options. When we examine the tender specifications, it becomes evident that there is a significant demand for certain specifics regarding surgical lamps in the public administration, or at the very least from the users. The requirements explicitly state that lighting systems must have the capability to produce a minimum of 160,000 lux. This amount of light is substantial, particularly when comparing it to the recommended illuminance levels outlined in regulations. Henceforth, our analysis will commence by scrutinizing the pertinent legislation, such as the EN Standard number 12464-1. This particular standard has been specifically designed to ascertain the appropriate level of illuminance for various work environments, emphasizing the crucial role of adequate lighting for any human activity. Among the different activities considered by the norm, the surgical one is also present. With reference to surgical activities, the standard specifically stipulates the need for a general illuminance of 1,000 lux in the operating room, and indicates values between 10,000 and 100,000 lux with regard to the illumination of the surgical focus, that is, the operating field. Now we have two options. Either we accept what the standard proposes as true, or we take a moment to question ourselves and understand why there is such a significant difference in the amount of light provided for surgical activity compared to other human activities. Normally, the standard suggests a light intensity of about 400 lux for any other human activity. So, it begs the question, Why is there such a huge disparity between the light intensity of the surgical field, ranging from 10,000 to 100,000 lux, and the recommended 400 lux for other activities? The key difference lies in the specific usage. When operating in a surgical setting, one must take into account the significant light absorption by both blood and tissue. Studies have shown that meat absorbs approximately 92% of incident light, while blood absorbs around 96%. This means that the light emitted from a source directed towards an operating cavity is almost entirely absorbed by the surrounding tissue. Only the remaining 5% of light is available to illuminate the area. Therefore, if we shine a light with an intensity of 100,000 lux on the operating field, only 5,000 lux will actually remain after absorption. Despite this, 5,000 lux still surpasses the typical illumination recommended for other human activities. However, it is now significantly reduced in this context. The higher intensity of light is necessary partly to accommodate this unique circumstance in the operating room. The presence of additional obstacles and specificities in the operating room further diminishes the previously mentioned discrepancy between the intensity requested for the operating field and the regular intensity. Unlike other tasks, there exist multiple obstacles that obstruct the transmission of light between the source and the surgical field during procedures. These impediments include the surgeon's head as well as various equipment and instruments in the room. Moreover, it is also crucial to acknowledge that most surgeries occur at a certain depth, which translates in the need for sufficient illumination of the cavity. Consequently, all these impediments must be taken into consideration, resulting in an augmented requirement of light intensity for successful surgical procedures. And it is precisely as a consequence of these obstacles and precisely because of these specificities that the starting light intensity in the operating room, more specifically on the operating field, must be much higher than in other human activities. Here, the standard asks precisely for a value between 10,000 and 100,000 lux. However, if we go and analyze what is proposed as the amount of minimum light intensity within the specifications and requests, we see how the value is below expectations. In the specifications called for in tenders, it is not strange to see requests between 160,000 lux. Some requests are even formulated in the term of at least 160,000 lux. 160,000 lux is a much higher value than the standard, but let's try to see why they ask for such a value. Let's ask ourselves, where the request for 160,000 lux comes from, why the quantity that is normally required of surgical lamps is of precisely 160,000 lux. Well, the request for 160,000 lux comes with reference to a standard about the specificity of surgical lamps. Why does one standard, the IEC 60601-241, have a much higher limit for the illuminance level of surgical lamps compared to another standard? The general demand for this value is based on the detailed guidelines outlined in this specific standard. However, the significant difference between the two standards raises the question of why such a variation exists. The illuminance limit set by IEC 60601-241 at 160,000 lux is considerably higher than what is indicated as appropriate by the other standard. What we therefore see on the one hand is a request for a specific standard for lighting in workplaces that calls for illuminance between 1,000 and 10,000 lux. And on the other hand, in the context of surgical lamps, there is a specific standard that imposes a maximum value of 160,000 lux for light intensity. We aim to integrate these standards by referring to specific works that have addressed the issue in the past. In particular, in 2009, a researcher highlighted the excessive light intensity produced by some surgical lamps. Here we will take this study as a basis to engage in a discussion to determine the optimal illuminance value that surgical lamps should generate. Let us delve into this research and explore potential solutions in order to improve the current standards and practices surrounding surgical lamps. The standard, as we have said, establishes 160,000 lux as the maximum illuminance value. However, This is the value that is established today. Referring back to the evolution of the standard EN 60601-241, we can now analyze how over the years this light intensity value of 160,000 lux has slowly come to be reduced. In its first edition, we see how the standard had no limit whatsoever in terms of light intensity. In its first revision, we see how a maximum value was placed, and indeed, a maximum value of 160,000 lux was established for surgical lamps. This maximum value, however, was placed as the maximum value of light intensity at a distance of 1 meter from the light source. In its subsequent amendments, the standard further modified this maximum value, and instead of considering it at a distance of 1 meter, it placed the maximum value of 160,000 lux at any distance between the light source and the measuring distance. That is, the surgical lamp today must not generate more than 160,000 lux at any distance between the light source and the operating field. Therefore, the underlying motive for the progression of regulations is to minimize the maximum level of intensity. Initially, there was no fixed specification, but subsequently a limit was implemented. To further decrease this limit, the capacity to surpass the specified value at any given distance was completely removed. In the draft revisions, we see how the next planned change includes a further reduction to 140,000 lux. Well, as we study the evolution of the specific standard for surgical lamps, we see how there is an alignment with respect to the requirement for adequate lighting in workplaces. Now it will perhaps make it clearer and more obvious the evidence brought by the researcher in 2009. In addition to the researcher, numerous other scholars have also emphasized the issues caused by excessive lighting. Their research collectively contributes to understanding the negative effects of excessive illumination, making a stronger case. What are the issues at hand? The primary concern relates to glare, which poses a significant risk to safety in the operating room. However, I will refrain from delving into further details regarding these matters, as an upcoming video will specifically address the topic of glare. Therefore, to determine the ideal brightness of a surgical lamp, it is generally accepted that it should be around 140,000 lux. This estimation is based on the understanding that such illumination is optimal for surgical procedures. Thank you for your attention, and have a good day.